We've all heard those horror stories about people's finances just completely imploding. Well, today we're going to dig into exactly how that happens. And we're going to do it by telling the story of Croak, a crocodile who, let's just say, made every classic mistake in the book. The goal here? To make sure you don't end up in the same boat.
So the big question is, how do you steer clear of those financial traps that can, lead to total ruin? We're going to answer that by looking at our friend Crook here, who is basically a walking, talking case study in what not to do.
All right, so meet Croc. He's our guy for this story, and well, he's in a really tough spot. He's lost everything, and yeah, the key word there is again. But here's the good news for us. We can totally learn from his story so that you don't have to make the same mistakes. So let's dive in and break down exactly where it all went off the rails.
Okay, so where do we even begin? Well, that brings us to lesson number one, and it's a big one: the danger of having absolutely no plan. Seriously, this is like the bedrock of almost every financial disaster.
Now, here's the thing. Croak's problem wasn't a lack of cash, or, well, shells in his case. He actually came into a whole pile of them. But, and this is the crucial part, without any kind of plan, all that wealth was just sitting there, like a big, shiny temptation, just waiting for his worst impulses to kick in.
And sure enough, that impulse showed up. It took the form of a golden fishing net. I mean, it was flashy, it was super tempting, and it turned out to be the very first domino to fall in his entire financial collapse.
So this right here, this was the fork in the road for Crook. On one side, you've got the golden net, all flash, zero substance. On the other side, you have what a real smart plan would look like. Something functional, something that could actually make him more shells. He went for style, and that one choice, it ended up costing him absolutely everything. And you've got to love the irony here, right? The one thing that made the net so appealing, how shiny it was the exact same thing that made it completely useless. The fish were literally scared away by the gleam. So what he bought was a beautiful, expensive fish repellent. It's the perfect metaphor for a terrible investment. Okay, so that first huge mistake leads us directly into his second one, taking a single, massive, all-or-nothing risk. So after losing all his shells on that useless net, Croc decides he's going to get back in the game with what he thinks is a totally brilliant idea: Algae Coin. You can probably guess where this is going. It was a super high-risk venture, a classic get-rich-quick kind of scheme.
I mean, look at this. This isn't a financial portfolio, right? It's a lottery ticket. Croc didn't diversify. He didn't spread his risk at all. He just gambled 100% of every last shell he had on one single unproven idea. And let's be crystal clear here. This was not investing. This was pure, uncut gambling. By betting every single thing on Algae Coin, he basically set himself up for only two possible outcomes: either a massive win or a total, catastrophic failure. There was absolutely no middle ground. And, well, you can probably guess what happened next. The idea completely tanked. And because he was all in, when Algae Coin went down to zero, so did Croak's entire net worth. A really painful lesson, but honestly, a pretty predictable one.
All right, this brings us to the final and maybe the sneakiest lesson from Croak's whole saga: the danger of ignoring those little debts. So at this point, he's completely broke. And what does he do? He starts borrowing. It all started innocently enough, just one shell here for something small, then another shell for something else. On their own, each little loan seemed totally harmless. And this was the fatal mindset. He kept telling himself, they're just small debts, it's no big deal. It's such a classic psychological trap, and honestly, it's one we can all fall into. Where we rationalize these small, bad habits until they just snowball into this massive, overwhelming problem. And just look at how fast it all spirals out of control. What started as just one little shell in the first week, by month 2, it had become an absolute monster. It's a perfect example of the terrifying power of compounding when you're talking about small problems that you just ignore. And that is exactly what happened. The monster that he created, just by ignoring these tiny debts, it eventually devoured every single thing he had left. And it left him right back where he started, flat broke. Okay, so we've walked through all of Croc's financial disasters. So what's the flip side? what does it actually mean to be a smart crocodile here? How do we take these lessons and, actually use them?
So, what does being smart really look like? It honestly boils down to 3 simple, powerful rules. Number 1, always have a plan, know where your shells are going. Number 2, don't risk everything on one bet, diversify. And number 3, take every single debt seriously, no matter how small, because those small debts, they have a way of growing up into monsters.
Look, the most important thing to take away from all of this is pretty simple. You don't have to go through what Croc went through. You get to learn from his failures without having to live them yourself. His story is basically a perfect roadmap of exactly what not to do. Croc learned his lesson the hard way. He'll probably get another chance to build things back up, and hopefully he'll be a lot smarter next time. But the real question isn't about him. It's about you. He learned from his mistakes. Will you learn from them too? So think about it. What is one small thing you can change, starting today, to make sure you never, ever become the next Croc?